Listen and do not scroll past this moment too quickly, because something inside you already paused when you read the title, didn't it? There was a subtle pull, a quiet nudge, something unexplainable that made you stop, even if just for a second. And you may try to brush it off as coincidence, as curiosity, as just another video or message in a sea of noise. But deep down, you know this feels different. This feels personal. This feels targeted. This feels like it found you. And that's because it did. This is not random. This is not luck. This is not just another message. This is a divine interruption, one that was set in motion long before this very day, long before July 5, 2026 ever appeared on a calendar. There are moments in your life where heaven breaks through the routine, interrupts the ordinary, and calls your attention with urgency. Not to entertain you, but to awaken you. And this is one of those moments. You've been asking questions, haven't you? Why did they leave? Why did that opportunity fall apart? Why did you feel pushed out, overlooked, dismissed, rejected again and again? Why did it feel like no matter how much you gave, how much you tried, how much you showed up, it was never enough? You carried those questions quietly. You smiled through the confusion. You told yourself, it's okay, it happens, but deep inside, something didn't sit right. Because the pattern repeated too many times to ignore. Different people, different places, same feeling, rejection. And what hurt the most wasn't always the loss, it was a confusion. Because you couldn't understand why. Why doors opened just enough to give you hope and then slammed shut without warning. Why people came close enough to feel like destiny only to disappear like they were never meant to stay. Why you kept finding yourself in rooms where you felt unseen, unheard, unchosen. It made you question yourself. Was it something you said? Something you did? Something you lacked? And over time, without even realizing it, rejection started to reshape how you saw yourself. It whispered lies in quiet moments. It planted doubt in your confidence. It made you shrink in places where you were meant to shine. But hear this clearly, because this is where everything begins to shift. What if nothing was wrong with you? What if every door that closed, every person that walked away, every opportunity that slipped through your fingers was not a sign of your failure, but a sign of divine intervention? What if the very thing you've been calling rejection was actually protection? Right now, as you're listening, something is stirring in your spirit. That feeling, that tightening in your chest, that quiet realization rising within you, that is not emotion. That is recognition. Because your soul already knows there is more to your story than what you've been told. You were never meant to understand it back then. If you had seen the full picture in those moments, if you had known what was being blocked, what was being prevented, what was being redirected, you might have resisted it. You might have held on to things that were quietly destroying you. You might have forced doors open that were never meant for your future. So instead, heaven allowed you to feel the rejection without revealing the reason. But now the timing has changed. Now the veil is lifting. Now the truth is ready to be revealed. Because July 5, 2026 is not just a date, it is a marker. A spiritual checkpoint, a moment where God is pulling you out of misunderstanding and into clarity. A moment where what once felt like pain is about to be redefined as purpose. A moment where the narrative you believe about your life is about to be rewritten by truth. You were not rejected. You were redirected. You were not overlooked. You were protected. And everything you thought was falling apart was actually falling into place in ways you could not yet see. But this is just the beginning. Because what you're about to uncover next will challenge everything you thought you understood about your past. Stay with this. Because the truth is about to go deeper. And once you see it, you will never look at rejection the same way again. Type "I am protected" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 2727 is now activated around your life. There is a kind of pain you learn to hide so well that even you forgot how deep it truly goes. Not the loud kind of pain. Not the kind that demands attention or sympathy. But the quiet, invisible kind. The kind that settles into your spirit slowly, over time, layer by layer, moment by moment, until it becomes part of how you see yourself. Rejection did not arrive all at once in your life. It came in fragments. Small moments at first. Subtle dismissal. Being overlooked in a room where you knew you belonged. Being unheard when your voice carried truth. Being replaced when you gave your loyalty. Being left behind when you showed up fully. And each time, you told yourself the same thing: it's not a big deal. But it was. Because what you didn't realize then was this: rejection doesn't just hurt your feelings, it begins to write your identity. You started to question things you never questioned before. You replayed conversations in your mind, searching for where you went wrong. You analyzed your words, your tone, your presence. You tried to become more acceptable, more agreeable, more enough. And slowly, without noticing, you began to shrink. You dimmed parts of yourself that were never meant to be dimmed. You silenced truths that were meant to be spoken. You adjusted your energy to fit into spaces that were never designed to hold who you truly are. All because rejection made you believe that something about you needed fixing. But listen carefully, because this is where the hidden pain reveals its true depth. It wasn't just about people leaving. It was about what their leaving made you believe. You began to carry silent questions that followed you into every new opportunity, every new relationship, every new environment. Questions like, will this happen again? Will they see me the same way? Should I hold back this time? And so, even when new doors opened, you didn't walk in fully. Even when new people entered your life, you didn't trust completely. Even when new opportunities appeared, you hesitated. Because the wound of rejection doesn't just live in the past, it tries to control your future. You learned how to protect yourself. You built emotional walls that felt like safety. You became more aware, more cautious, more guarded. And from the outside, it looked like growth. It looked like strength. It looked like maturity. But inside there was still a part of you asking, why wasn't I chosen? That question echoed louder than you admitted. Because you saw others being accepted. You saw others being celebrated. You saw doors opening for people who didn't seem more qualified, more capable, or more deserving than you. And it confused you. It made you feel invisible. And sometimes, if you're honest, it made you feel forgotten. But here is the truth that changes everything, and it may challenge you at first. Rejection was never proof of your inadequacy. It was evidence of your misalignment with places, people, and paths that could not carry your purpose. You were trying to belong in environments that were never built for your calling. You were trying to be accepted by people who could not recognize what you carry. You were trying to force connections that heaven had already marked as temporary. And because you could not see that at the time, it felt like loss. It felt like failure. It felt like defeat. But the deeper pain was not the rejection itself, it was the misunderstanding of it. Because misunderstanding creates wounds that last longer than the event. You didn't just lose opportunities, you lost clarity about who you were. You didn't just lose people, you lost trust in your own value. And that is where the real healing needs to happen. Not just healing from what they did, but healing from what you believe about yourself because of it. Because the truth is, you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were never the problem. You were placed in environments that could not sustain your level of growth, your depth of perception, your capacity for purpose. And instead of recognizing that, you internalized the rejection. But now, something is shifting. Now, you are beginning to see that the pattern was not random. Now, you are beginning to realize that every repeated experience carried a hidden message. Now, you are beginning to question the narrative you've believed for so long. And that is where transformation begins. Because before you can understand the protection, you must first acknowledge the pain. Before you can see the divine strategy, you must confront the emotional impact. Before you can rise above rejection, you must release the identity it tried to place on you. This is not about ignoring what happened. This is about finally seeing it for what it truly was. A wound, yes, but also a signal. A signal that something deeper was at work even when you couldn't see it. And what you are about to uncover next will begin to reveal that hidden work in a way that will completely change how you view your past. Type "I am healing from rejection" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 3838 is now surrounding your spirit. There comes a moment in your journey when everything you believe about your past begins to unravel, not to confuse you, but to correct you. And this is that moment. Because what if the story you've been telling yourself about rejection is incomplete? What if the pain was real, but the meaning you attached to it was wrong? You felt pushed away. You felt denied. You felt overlooked. And naturally, you interpreted those moments through the lens of loss. You told yourself that something ended, something slipped, something was taken from you. But what you could not see at the time was what was happening behind the scenes, beyond your natural understanding, beyond your emotional perception. Because while you were grieving what left, heaven was guarding what was ahead. This is the part most people never realize. Rejection is not always removal from something good. Sometimes it is rescue from something hidden. You saw the opportunity, but you did not see the trap attached to it. You saw the person, but you did not see the limitation they carried. You saw the door, but you did not see where it would eventually lead you. And because your vision was limited to what was visible, the outcome felt like loss. But God's vision was not limited. There were conversations you were never meant to hear. There were intentions you were never meant to discover. There were outcomes you were never meant to experience. And instead of exposing everything in a way that would overwhelm your heart, God simply closed the door. And it felt like rejection. But it was protection. Think about it. There were moments you were so certain something was right for you. You felt aligned. You felt ready. You felt invested. And then suddenly, without warning, it fell apart. No explanation. No clarity. Just silence and separation. And that silence, that lack of closure, that absence of understanding, that is what made it hurt the most. Because you were left with questions instead of answers. But now, you are beginning to understand something deeper. Not every closed door is meant to be explained. Some doors are closed because the explanation would not change your attachment. Some endings happen without clarity because clarity would not have made you let go. So instead of explaining, God intervened. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were chosen for something that required separation from what you were holding on to. You see, rejection has a way of exposing where your expectations were placed. It reveals what you were hoping would fulfill you. It shows where your trust was invested. It uncovers what you believed would complete your next step. And when those things fall apart, it feels like everything is collapsing. But in reality, everything is being corrected. Because you were never meant to build your future on unstable foundations. You were never meant to attach your identity to temporary connections. You were never meant to settle in places that could not support the level of purpose assigned to your life. And so, what you called rejection was actually redirection with precision. It was not random. It was not careless. It was intentional. Every closed door, every delayed response, every unexpected ending carried a deeper instruction that you were not ready to see at the time. But now you are. Now you are beginning to see the pattern. Now you are beginning to recognize that the same force that removed things from your life also preserves something within you. Because despite everything that left, you are still here. Despite every moment you felt dismissed, something within you remained intact. Despite every loss, you were never completely broken. Why? Because rejection did not have permission to destroy you. It only had permission to redirect you. And that changes everything. Because now you can look back and realize that what felt like abandonment was actually divine selection. You were not being excluded from your path. You were being guided toward it. And the deeper truth is this: if those doors had remained open, if those people had stayed, if those opportunities had worked out the way you wanted, you would not be where you are now. You would be somewhere else. Somewhere smaller. Somewhere limited. Somewhere misaligned. But instead you were moved. Even when it hurt. Even when you didn't understand. Even when you resisted it. You were moved. And now, you are standing at a point where the truth is finally catching up with your experience. Rejection was never what you thought. It was never a sign that you were not enough. It was never evidence that you were overlooked. It was never proof that you were meant to be left behind. It was a filter, a divine filter, separating you from what could not go with you into your next level. And as this truth settles into your spirit, something begins to lift. The weight of misunderstanding begins to break. The narrative you carried begins to shift. And for the first time, you are not just remembering your past, you are reinterpreting it. And that is where healing turns into revelation. But what you are about to see next will take this even deeper. Because it will show you that those closed doors were not random moments, they were strategic decisions. Type ISE the truth now in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 4545 is now activated around your path. As this truth begins to settle into your spirit, understand this: every revelation you receive is not just for you. It is meant to become light for someone else still walking in confusion. When you sow into this mission through Super Thanks or PayPal, you are planting seeds into hearts that are still searching for clarity, still crying in silence, still asking the same questions you once carried. The word declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you." And this is not just a verse, it is a living promise over your obedience in this moment. I feel led to say this clearly: when I give, I am not losing. I am aligning with heaven's flow, and what I release becomes a harvest in another soul. This message you are hearing right now is reaching you because someone before you chose to give, chose to support, chose to keep the light burning. Now it is your moment to step into that same flow, to become a vessel, to become a channel of divine impact. Do not hesitate, do not delay, because what you release today will echo in lives you may never see, but heaven will always record. Go now. Support through the PayPal link in the description or the QR code on your screen, and become part of this divine assignment. There are certain moments in your life that replay in your mind, not because they were the most joyful, but because they were the most confusing. Moments where you were so close, so certain, so convinced that this was it. The opportunity you had been waiting for. The connection that felt perfectly aligned. The breakthrough that seemed just within reach. You could see it. You could feel it. You had already started imagining your life on the other side of it. And then it closed. Abruptly, unexpectedly, without warning, no explanation, no clear reason. Just a sudden shift that left you standing there, trying to make sense of what just happened. And that is the kind of moment that lingers. Because it wasn't just about losing the opportunity, it was about losing the version of your future you had already started to believe in. You saw yourself there. You prepared for it mentally. You aligned your expectations with it. And when it disappeared, it felt like something was taken from you. But here is the deeper truth that is now being revealed to you. Nothing that was truly meant for you was ever taken. It was redirected. Because what looked like a closed door was not an end in it with a detour. And not a random detour. A precise one. There are paths in life that look promising on the surface but carry consequences you were never meant to experience. There are environments that appear to offer growth but are built on foundations that would have eventually limited you. There are connections that feel right in the moment but are not designed to sustain the level of expansion your life requires. And the challenge is this: you cannot always see that in the beginning. You only see the potential. You only see what could be. You only see the visible parts of the opportunity. But God sees the full timeline. This is where the road leads 5 steps ahead, 10 steps ahead, even years ahead. He sees the hidden obstacles, the unseen compromises, the quiet limitations that would have slowly shaped your life in ways you were not meant to settle into. So instead of allowing you to walk into something that would eventually break you, he simply closed the door early. And it felt like rejection, but it was actually intervention. Think about the doors that closed on you, the job you didn't get, a relationship that ended, the opportunity that slipped away. At the time, each one felt like a missed chance. But what if you could see what would have happened if those doors had stayed open? What if you could see the stress that would have consumed you, the misalignment that would have drained you, the version of yourself you would have had to become just to maintain something that was never truly meant for you? Would you still call it a loss? Or would you recognize it as protection? Because the truth is, some doors are closed not because you are unqualified, but because you are overqualified for where they would have taken you. Some doors are shut not because you were not ready, but because you were too valuable to be placed in something that could not honor your full potential. And some doors disappear not because you missed your moment, but because that moment was never meant to define your future. This is what makes divine detours so difficult to understand in real time. They do not feel like guidance. They feel like disruption. They do not feel like alignment. They feel like delay. They do not feel like protection. They feel like rejection. But as time moves forward, something begins to shift. You start to see where you ended up instead. You start to recognize the paths that opened after those doors closed. You begin to understand that if one thing had worked out, you would not have been available for something greater. Because every closed door created space. Space for something else to enter your life. Space for a different direction to unfold. Space for a version of your journey that aligns more closely with who you are becoming. And that is the part you could not see before. You were focused on what was lost, not what was being made possible. You were holding on to what closed instead of preparing for what was opening. But now, you are being invited to see it differently. And now, you are being asked to look back, not with regret but with awareness. Because those doors were not random. They were decisions. Divine decisions. Carefully placed interruptions designed to keep you from settling into paths that would have limited your growth. You were not being blocked. You were being guided, even when it felt uncomfortable, even when it felt unfair, even when it made no sense. You were being guided. And now, as this realization settles into your spirit, something begins to release. The frustration you carried toward those moments begins to soften. The confusion begins to clear. The weight of what could have been begins to lose its hold on you, because you are starting to see that what could have been was never what should have been. And that changes everything. Because now, instead of questioning why those doors close, you can begin to trust that they closed for a reason. A reason that was always working in your favor even when it felt like it wasn't. And what you are about to understand next will take this even deeper, because it will show you that it was not just doors that were removed from your life, it was people too. Type "I trust the closed doors" in the comments if you receive this message. Lesson code 5656 is now activated over your journey. There is a different kind of pain that comes not from closed doors but from open hearts that were not returned. Because opportunities can be replaced, but people leave marks. You remember them. Not just their faces, but their presence. The conversations. The laughter. The sense of connection that made you believe they were meant to stay. And that is what made it harder to understand when they left. Because it wasn't always dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet. They just chained you. Their energy shifted. Their effort faded. Their presence became distant. And you found yourself holding on to something that no longer felt the same, trying to understand when it started slipping away. And the hardest part, you didn't just lose them. You lost the version of a relationship you believe in. You lost the future you imagined with them in it. You lost the sense of certainty that they were part of your journey. And so you questioned it. You replayed moments. You analyzed conversations. You tried to identify what went wrong. You wondered if you could have done something differently, said something better, shown up in a way that would have made them stay. Because when people leave, it feels personal. It feels like a reflection of your value. It feels like you were not enough to be chosen, not enough to be kept, not enough to be prioritized. But listen carefully, because this is where the truth begins to shift everything you thought you understood. Not everyone who enters your life is assigned to stay in it. Some people are temporary by design. Not because they are bad, not because they are wrong, but because their role in your life has a limit. There are connections that exist for a season, not a lifetime. There are relationships that serve a purpose at one stage of your journey but cannot continue into the next. There are people who align with who you were but cannot align with who you are becoming. And when that shift begins to happen, something changes. You start to grow in ways they do not understand. You start to see things differently. You start to move differently. Your priorities shift. Your awareness deepens. Your direction becomes clear. And suddenly the connection no longer fits. Not because you rejected them, but because you outgrew the alignment that once held you together. And instead of recognizing that growth, it feels like rejection. It feels like distance. It feels like loss. But in reality, it is separation. And not just any separation. Sacred separation. Because what you need to understand is this: not everyone can go where you are going. Some people are meant to walk with you for a part of your journey, but not all of it. And if they stayed beyond their assignment, they would begin to limit you. They would hold you to a version of yourself that you are no longer meant to be. They would expect you to remain in a space you are meant to grow beyond. And slowly, without realizing it, you would start shrinking again just to maintain the connection. So instead of allowing that to happen, God allows the separation. Not always with explanation, not always with closure, but always with intention. Because sometimes the only way to protect your growth is to remove what can no longer grow with you. And that is the part that is difficult to accept. Because you still see the good in them. You still remember what the connection felt like at its best. You still hold on to the moments that made it meaningful. And so you wonder, why couldn't it stay that way? But relationships are not meant to stay the same. They either grow with you or they grow apart from you. And when they grow apart, it does not mean the connection was meaningless. It means it fulfilled its purpose. It means it served its role. It means it gave you what you needed at the time, even if it was not meant to last forever. And when you begin to see it that way, something changes inside of you. The pain starts to transform. The confusion begins to clear. The feeling of rejection starts to lose its hold. Because you realize you were not abandoned. You were transitioned. You were not left behind. You were moved forward. And the people who could not come with you were never meant to. This does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you erase the connection. It means you release the expectation that they were supposed to stay longer than they did. It means you honor what was without holding on to what is no longer. Because holding on to people who are no longer aligned with your path will only slow down where you are meant to go next. And you were not called to stay in places that no longer support your growth. You were called to evolve, to expand, to move forward even when it means moving without certain people. And as difficult as that may feel, it is also where your freedom begins. Because once you stop interpreting their absence as rejection, you can start seeing it as direction. Direction toward people who will understand you at your current level. Direction toward connections that align with who you are, not who you used to be. Direction toward relationships that will not require you to shrink in order to stay. And that is where everything begins to open up. But what you are about to understand next will take this even deeper. Because it will reveal that it was not just people and doors that were delayed, even your timing was being controlled. Type "I release" who left in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 6767 is now activated over your relationships. There is a specific kind of frustration that does not come from loss but from waiting. Not the kind of waiting where nothing is happening, but the kind where everything feels like it is almost happening. You felt it, didn't you? Moments where things started moving, where progress seemed visible, where you could finally sense that something was about to shift in your favor. Doors didn't fully open, but they cracked just enough to give you hope. Opportunities didn't fully arrive, but they came close enough to make you prepare. People didn't fully commit, but they showed enough interest to make you believe something was forming. And then it stalled. Not completely gone, just delayed. Paused in a way that left you suspended between expectation and uncertainty. And that space, that in-between spaces where frustration grows the most. Because you were not dealing with clear rejection. You were dealing with prolonged anticipation. You kept thinking, maybe it just needs more time. Maybe it's still coming together. Maybe I just need to be patient. So you waited, and waited, and waited, until patience slowly turned into confusion. Because the timing never aligned the way you expected it to. Things did not happen when you were ready. Things did not unfold when you felt prepared. Things did not arrive when you believed they should. And over time, that delay started to feel personal. It started to feel like you were being overlooked again. Like something was being withheld from you. Like your moment kept getting pushed further away while others seemed to move forward without interruption. And if you are honest, there were times you questioned it. Times you wondered if you missed something. Times you asked yourself if you were somehow behind. But listen carefully, because this is where everything begins to shift again. Delay is not always denial. And it is not always a sign that something is being kept from you. Sometimes, delay is protection from something you are not yet meant to encounter. Because timing is not just about when something happens. It is about who you are when it happens. There are moments in your life where you are ready for the opportunity but not yet ready for the responsibility that comes with it. There are seasons where you are prepared for the connection but not yet positioned for the depth it requires. There are opportunities that look right but would arrive at the wrong time in your development. And if they came too early, they would not elevate you. They would overwhelm you. They would expose you to pressures you are not yet equipped to handle. They would stretch you in ways that would feel more like breaking than growth. So instead of allowing that misalignment, God adjusts the timing, not to frustrate you, but to prepare you. And preparation does not always feel productive. It often feels like waiting. It often feels like nothing is happening. It often feels like you are standing still while everything around you is moving forward. But beneath that stillness, something is being formed. Your awareness is deepening. Your perspective is shifting. Your capacity is expanding. Even when you do not see visible progress, internal alignment is taking place. And that alignment is what determines how you will handle what is coming. Because the truth is, if certain things had arrived when you first wanted them, you would not have experienced them the same way. You would have approached them with a different mindset, a different level of understanding, a different sense of identity, and the difference would have changed the outcome. So instead of giving you what you wanted at the wrong time, God held it back, not permanently, but intentionally. Until the timing matched your growth, until your internal development aligned with the external opportunity, until you became the version of yourself that could not just receive it but sustain it. And that is what delay is really about. It is not about making you wait. It is about making you ready. Ready to handle what is coming without losing yourself in it. Ready to walk into opportunities without shrieking to maintain them. Ready to build something that will last, not something that will collapse under pressure. And now, when you look back at those delayed moments, something begins to make sense. You start to see how you have changed since then, how your thinking has evolved, how your boundaries have strengthened, how your awareness has sharpened. You are not the same person who was waiting back then. And that is exactly the point. Because what is coming next in your life requires this version of you, not the version you used to be. So what felt like delay was actually development. What felt like being held back was actually being built up. What felt like frustration was actually formation. And now, you are stepping into a place where timing is no longer working against you. It is working with you. Because everything that was once delayed is now aligning. But what you are about to understand next will take this even deeper. Because it will reveal that all of this was not just about timing, people, or doors. It was about your identity. Type "I trust divine timing" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 7878 is now activated over your season. There is a moment in every transformation where the external circumstances stop being the focus and the internal identity becomes the turning point. And this is that moment for you. Because everything you have experienced up until now, the closed doors, the people who left, the delays that stretched your patience, none of it was just about what happened around you. It was about what was being formed within you. You see, rejection does something subtle but powerful. It does not just affect your experiences, it shapes your identity. It begins to influence how you see yourself without you even realizing it. It creates a quiet narrative in your mind that follows you into new environments, new relationships, new opportunities. A narrative that says, "Be careful." A narrative that whispers, "Do not expect too much." A narrative that warns, "You have been here before." And over time, that narrative becomes your default lens. You start entering rooms already preparing for disappointment. You start meeting people already expecting distance. You start approaching opportunities already bracing for rejection. Not because you are weak, but because you have been conditioned by repeated experiences. And this is where the real shift needs to happen. Because as long as you carry the identity of someone who has been rejected, you will continue to interpret your life through that lens. Even when things begin to change, even when new doors open, even when the right people arrive, you will still hesitate. You will still question. You will still hold back. Not because the opportunity is wrong, but because your identity has not yet caught up with your transformation. And this is why this moment is so important. Because you are no longer who you were when those experiences happened. You are not the same person who stood in those moments of confusion, trying to understand why things were not working out. You have grown. You have evolved. You have gained awareness. You have developed strength you did not know you had. But if your identity is not shifted, you will continue to live as if you are still that version of yourself. And that is where many people remain stuck. Not because their circumstances have not changed, but because their perception of themselves has not. So listen carefully, because this is where everything begins to realign. You were never rejected. You were selected. Selected for a path that required separation from what could not sustain your purpose. Selected for a journey that demanded growth beyond what was comfortable. Selected for a level of awareness that not everyone around you was ready to carry. And because of that selection, certain things could not stay. Certain doors could not remain open. Certain people could not continue walking with you. Not because you were not enough, but because you were too aligned with something greater. This is not about ego. This is not about superiority. This is about understanding assignment. Because when you are assigned to something higher, your life begins to filter itself. Things that do not match your direction begin to fall away. Environments that cannot support your growth begin to shift. Connections that cannot align with your purpose begin to separate. And if you do not understand what is happening, it feels like rejection. But when you see it clearly, it is refinement. It is selection in motion. And now, you are being invited to step into a new identity. Not the identity of someone who was overlooked, but someone who was preserved. Not someone who was left behind, but someone who was repositioned. Not someone who was denied, but someone who was being prepared for something more aligned. This shift is not just mental. It is spiritual. Because the way you see yourself determines the way you move. If you still see yourself as someone who is waiting to be chosen, you will continue to look outward for validation. But if you understand that you are already chosen, your movement changes. Your posture changes. Your decisions change. You no longer chase what aligns with your old identity. You begin to attract what aligns with your new one. And this is where everything begins to open. Because the moment you stop identifying with rejection, you stop expecting it. The moment you stop expecting it, you stop attracting situations that reinforce it. And instead you begin to move with clarity, with confidence, with a sense of knowing that what is meant for you will not require you to question your value. Because your value was never determined by what left. It was always rooted in what you carry. And what you carry has been preserved through everything you have experienced. That is why you are still here. That is why you are still moving forward. That is why, despite everything, something within you never fully gave up. Because your identity was never meant to be shaped by rejection. It was meant to be revealed through it. And now, you are stepping into that revelation. You are no longer trying to understand why things did not work out. You are beginning to understand why they had to unfold that way. And that understanding is what shifts your identity. From rejected to chosen. From confused to aligned. From questioning to knowing. And what you are about to understand next will reveal why all of this happened in the first place. Because it was not just about growth. It was also about resistance. Type "I am chosen" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 8989 is now activated over your identity. There is something you must understand now, something that explains why your journey has felt heavier than it should have, more complex than it needed to be, and more resistant than you expected. Because what you experienced was not just emotional. It was spiritual. And once you see this clearly, everything begins to make sense in a way it never has before. You were not just going through rejection. You were encountering resistance. There is a difference. Rejection feels like something is being taken away from you. Resistance reveals that something is trying to stop you. And the reason resistance showed up in your life is not because you were weak, it is because you carry something valuable. Something that not every environment could handle. Something that not every person could understand. Something that not every situation was designed to support. You have to realize this: not everyone experiences the same level of opposition. Some people move through life with minimal resistance because they are not disrupting anything. They are not challenging patterns. They are not stepping outside of what is familiar or expected. But you were never meant to stay within those boundaries. From the beginning, there has been something different about you. The way you think, the way you perceive, the way you question things others accept without thought, the way you feel deeply, even when others remain surface level. And that difference, that awareness, that depth, it carries weight. It carries purpose. And purpose attracts resistance. Because anything that has the potential to shift environments, to break patterns, to move beyond limitations will face opposition. Not because it is wrong, but because it is powerful. And when you do not understand that, you begin to misinterpret the resistance. You think something is wrong with you. You think you are being rejected. You think you are being overlooked. But in reality you are being opposed. Opposed by circumstances that cannot contain you. Opposed by environments that cannot align with you. Opposed by situations that are not designed to carry what you bring. And that opposition does not always show up in obvious ways. It shows up subtly, through delays that seem unnecessary, through misunderstandings that feel intentional, through people who misinterpret you without reason, through opportunities that almost work but never fully align. And all of it creates the same feeling: rejection. But now you are beginning to see it differently. Because if it was truly rejection, you would have been removed completely. You would have been disconnected from your path entirely. But that never happened. Despite everything, you kept moving. You kept growing. You kept evolving. Even when things did not work out, you were still being guided forward. And that is the evidence that what you experienced was not rejection. It was resistance without permission to destroy you. It was opposition without authority to stop you. It was pressure without the power to break you. Because your path has always been protected even when it did not feel that way. And this is where your understanding shifts into something deeper. You were not just navigating life circumstances. You were navigating spiritual alignment. And alignment requires separation. Alignment requires correction. Alignment requires movement away from what cannot support where you are going. And that process does not always feel peaceful. It often feels like conflict. It often feels like things are not working. It often feels like you are being pushed away from places you were trying to stay connected to. But that discomfort, that resistance, it was guiding you. It was redirecting you. It was ensuring that you did not settle into environments that would have eventually limited you. And now, you are in a position to see this clearly. The reason it felt so intense is because your path matters. The reason it felt so consistent is because your growth was being protected. The reason it felt so personal is because you had not yet separated the experience from your identity. But now you can. Now you can look back and see that every moment of resistance carried a purpose. Every challenge carried direction. Every obstacle carried information about where you did not belong. And instead of seeing those moments as rejection, you can begin to see them as confirmation. Confirmation that you were not meant to stay there. Confirmation that you were not meant to settle for that. Confirmation that something greater was already in motion even when you could not see it. And this is where your power returns. Because once you stop interpreting resistance as rejection, you stop internalizing it. You stop questioning your value. You stop shrinking your presence. You stop adjusting yourself to fit into places that were never meant for you. And instead you begin to move with clarity, with awareness, with confidence in the direction you are being led. Because you understand now you were never being pushed away without reason. You were being guided with precision. And what you are about to understand next will bring everything together. Because it will show you that none of this was random. There had been a pattern all along. Type "I am protected from what I cannot see" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 9090 is now activated around your life. As you stand in this awareness, recognize this truth: every time light breaks through confusion in your life, it is meant to become a torch for someone else still walking in darkness. When you release your seed through super thanks or the PayPal link in the description, you are not supporting a video. You are igniting a chain of transformation across lives you may never meet. The word speaks: cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days it will return to you. And this is not symbolic. It is a living flow that multiplies through obedience. I declare this with you now. When I give, I activate divine movement, and what I release becomes light in another person's storm. This moment is not casual. It is prophetic, and your response carries weight beyond what you can see. Do not hesitate in this window of alignment, because delay can disconnect you from a moment meant for impact. Go now. Act with intention. Support through the PayPal link or the QR code, and step into your role in this divine mission. There comes a moment not loud, not dramatic, but deeply undeniable, where everything begins to connect. Not all at once. Not enough for you to pause it. Enough for you to say to yourself, wait, this has happened before. Because what once felt like isolated moments now begin to reveal themselves as a pattern. And this is where your awakening begins. You start to look back, not with the same confusion you once had, but with a new level of awareness. You begin to notice that the same type of situation kept showing up in different forms. Different people, different environments, different opportunity, but the same outcome. The same feeling. The same ending. The same sense of being pushed away, delayed, or redirected. And for the first time, instead of asking, why does this keep happening to me? You begin to ask a different question. What is this trying to show me? A shift. That one question changes everything. Because now, you are no longer seeing yourself as a victim of repeated rejection. You are beginning to recognize a pattern of intentional redirection. You start to notice that every time you were about to settle into something that felt comfortable but limited, something disrupted it. Every time you were about to attach yourself to someone who could only meet you at a certain level, something created distance. Every time you were about to step into an opportunity that looked good on the surface, but did not fully align, something delayed it or removed it entirely. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Because it becomes clear that these moments were not random. They were consistent, precise, strategic. There was an invisible pattern operating in your life, one that you could not recognize before because you were too close to the experience. You were feeling it in real time, reacting to it emotionally, trying to understand it logically without the perspective that only time can give. But now you have that perspective. Now you can step back and see the full picture, and what you see begins to challenge everything you once believed. Because if it was truly rejection, it would not have been so consistent in its direction. If it was truly loss, it would not have repeatedly moved you away from the same types of situations. If it was truly random, it would not have followed such a clear pattern. But it did, and that means something was guiding it. Something beyond your immediate understanding. Something that was not just reacting to your choices but actively shaping your path. And once you recognize that, something shifts inside of you. The confusion that once clouded your past begins to clear. The frustration that once weighed on your memories begins to lift. Because you are no longer looking at disconnected events. You are seeing a coordinated process. A process that has been moving you step by step away from what could not hold your purpose and toward what can. And this realization, it does something powerful. It removes the emotional charge from those past experiences. Not because they did not hurt, but because you now understand why they had to happen. You begin to see that every no carried direction. Every delay carried alignment. Every ending carried movement. And none of it was wasted. None of it was meaningless. None of it was accidental. It was all part of a pattern that was shaping you while guiding you. And now, you are no longer questioning the pattern. You are trusting it. Because you can see where it has brought you. You can see how it has protected you from situations that would have limited your growth. You can see how it has preserved parts of you that would have been compromised in the wrong environments. You can see how it has consistently moved you forward even when it felt like you were being held back. And that awareness, it changes how you move going forward. Because now, when something does not work out, you do not immediately interpret it as rejection. You pause. You observe. You ask yourself, is this part of the pattern? And that question creates space. Space for clarity. Space for understanding. Space for trust. Because you know now you are not navigating life alone. There is a pattern guiding you. A pattern protecting you. A pattern aligning you. And the more you recognize it, the more you can move with it instead of resisting it. This is your awakening. Not just to what happened, but to how it all connects. Not just to your past, but to the purpose within it. And as this awareness deepens, you begin to release something you have been holding onto for a long time. The need to question every outcome. The need to understand every ending. The need to make sense of every delay. Because now, you trust that even when you do not fully understand, there is still alignment happening. And that trusted changes everything. But what you are about to step into next will take this even further. Because now that you see the pattern, you are ready to release what it was trying to free you from. Type I see the pattern in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1010 is now activated over your awareness. There is one final step that separates awareness from transformation, and it is not easy. It is release. Because seeing the pattern is powerful, but holding onto the pain will still keep you connected to what you were meant to move beyond. You can understand why things happened. You can recognize the redirection. You can even accept that it was protection. But if you are still carrying the emotional weight of those experiences, you are still tied to them. And this is where many people remain stuck. Not because they lack understanding, but because they have not let go of the feeling. The feeling of being overlooked. The feeling of being replaced. The feeling of being misunderstood. The feeling of not being chosen. Those emotions do not disappear automatically just because you gain clarity. They linger. They sit quietly beneath your awareness, and they show up in subtle ways: in hesitation, in doubt, in guarded responses, in the way you hold back even when everything in front of you is different now, because part of you is still holding on to what happened back then. And this is where the release must happen, not because your pain was not valid, but because it is no longer necessary. You are not in those situations anymore. You are not surrounded by those same people. You are not standing in those same environments. But if you are still carrying the emotional imprint of those experiences, you are allowing them to follow you into places they no longer belong. And that is what release is about. It is not about pretending it did not hurt. It is not about ignoring what happened. It is about removing the power those experiences still have over how you see yourself. Because the truth is, the events are already over. The only thing that remains is your interpretation of them. And that interpretation is what you now have the power to change. You can continue to see those moments as rejection, or you can begin to see them as redirection. You can continue to carry the feeling of being overlooked, where you can recognize that you were being preserved for something that required separation. You can continue to question your value, or you can begin to understand that your value was never determined by those outcomes in the first place. And this is where the release becomes intentional, because you are choosing to let go, not because it was easy, but because it is necessary. Necessary for your growth, necessary for your peace, necessary for your next level. Because you cannot carry old interpretations into new seasons without distorting what is in front of you. If you are still holding on to the belief that you will be rejected, you will approach new opportunities with hesitation. If you are still holding on to the feeling of being overlooked, you will struggle to fully receive recognition when it comes. If you are still carrying the weight of past experiences, you will not fully step into the space that has been prepared for you now. And that is why this moment matters. Because this is where you make a decision. A decision to release the pain, not because it was insignificant, but because it no longer defines you. A decision to let go of the misinterpretation and replace it with truth. A decision to stop carrying what was never meant to stay with you. And as you begin to release, something shifts. The heaviness begins to lift. The tension begins to ease. The need to constantly look back begins to fade. Because you are no longer anchored to those experiences. You are no longer trying to make sense of them. You are no longer carrying them as evidence of something being wrong with you. You are allowing them to become part of your understanding without becoming part of your identity. And that is where freedom begins. Because now, you can move forward without the weight of the past shaping every step. Now, you can enter new spaces without carrying old expectations. Now, you can engage with new opportunities without projecting previous outcomes onto them. You are no longer reacting to what happened. You are responding to what is in front of you now. And that shift, it changes everything. Because it creates space. Space for new experiences. Space for new connections. Space for new opportunities to enter your life without being filtered through old pain. And that is what prepares you for what is coming next. Because what is ahead of you requires this level of release. It requires you to be fully present, not partially tied to what has already passed. It requires you to step forward without hesitation, without doubt, without the need to protect yourself from something that is no longer there. And now, you are ready for that. Because you have seen the pattern. You have understood the purpose. And now you are letting it go. But what you are about to step into next will reveal why everything you lost was never truly lost. It was being replaced. Type "I release the past" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1111 is now activated over your spirit. There is something you are beginning to feel now, something subtle, but undeniable. It is not the same feeling you had before. It is not confusion. It is not frustration. It is not even questioning anymore. It is a quiet sense of alignment, a realization that something is opening not suddenly, not forcefully, but naturally. And that is because you are stepping into a space that was always meant for you. Not something you have to fight for. Not something you have to prove yourself for. But something that was preserved, protected, while everything else was being removed. You see, what you once called loss was actually clearing space for something that could not arrive while you were still attached to what was never meant to stay. Because as long as you were holding on to those old doors, those old connections, those old expectations, there was no room for what was truly aligned with your path. And now that you have released, now that you have understood, now that you have shifted your identity, you are finally in position to receive. And this is where elevation begins. Not in a dramatic moment, not in a sudden breakthrough that changes everything overnight, but in a steady, undeniable shift in direction. You start to notice that things feel different. Opportunities do not feel forced. They flow. Connections do not feel uncertain. They align. You are no longer trying to make things work. You are recognizing what already does. And that is the difference. Because what is meant for you does not require the same struggle as what was not. What is aligned with your path does not come with the same confusion as what you were trying to hold on to before. What has been preserved for you does not create the same internal conflict. Instead, it brings clarity. It brings ease. It brings a sense of confirmation that does not need constant questioning. And that is how you know you are stepping into something different. Because you are not chasing it. You are recognizing it. You are no longer trying to convince yourself that something is right. You can feel it. There is no internal resistance. There is no need to overanalyze. There is no need to adjust yourself to fit into it. Because it already fits. And that is what makes this moment so powerful. Because everything you once struggled to hold on to is now being replaced by something you do not have to struggle for. Something that meets you at your level instead of asking you to lower yourself to maintain it. Something that supports your growth instead of limiting it. Something that aligns with who you are now, not who you used to be. And this is where you begin to see the full picture. Loving you lost was truly lost. It was exchanged for something that matches your current level of awareness, your current level of growth, your current level of identity. Because you are not the same person anymore. And your life cannot reflect who you used to be, it must align with who you have become. That is why certain things had to be removed. That is why certain doors had to close. That is why certain people had to leave. Because they were connected to a version of you that no longer exists. And now what is arriving is connected to who you are now. That is elevation. Not just moving forward, but moving into alignment. And as you step into this space, something else begins to shift. Your confidence. Not the kind that comes from external validation, but the kind that comes from internal knowing. You no longer question if you belong. You no longer doubt if you are enough. You no longer look for confirmation in every situation. Because you understand now what is meant for you will confirm itself. And that understanding changes how you move. You become more intentional, more aware, more aligned with your direction. You stop forcing what does not fit. You stop chasing what does not respond. You stop holding on to what does not grow. Because you know what is for you will not require that. And that is where your peace comes from. Not from everything being perfect, but from everything being aligned. And this alignment, it is not something you created on your own. It is something that was prepared for you while you were going through everything you thought was loss. It was being preserved, protected from the wrong timing, protected from the wrong connections, protected from the wrong version of you, until you were ready. And now you are. Now, you are stepping into what was always meant to be yours. Not because you fought harder, not because you proved yourself, but because you aligned with the process that brought you here. And this is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning of a new level. A level where you no longer see rejection as loss. You see it as preparation. And what comes next will confirm everything you have just realized. Because the final truth is about to be revealed. Type "I step into what is mine" in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1212 is now activated over your path. Now you can finally see it, not partially, not emotionally, not through confusion, but clearly. Everything that once felt like rejection was never meant to harm you. It was shielding you. There is a difference between something being taken from you and something being kept away from you. And for so long, you believed things were being taken. You believed opportunities were slipping away. You believed people were leaving you. You believed doors were closing against you. But now, you stand in a different awareness. Now, you can see that those same moments were actually standing between you and something you were never meant to experience. Something that would have drained you. Something that would have delayed you. Something that would have distracted you from your true path. And instead of allowing you to walk into that, you were blocked from it. Protected from it. Shielded from it. Even when it felt like loss. Because protection does not always feel like safety in the moment. Sometimes it feels like confusion. Sometimes it feels like discomfort. Sometimes it feels like things not working out the way you wanted. But that is only because you could not yet see what you were being protected from. And now you can. Now you can look back and recognize that certain situations would have required you to become someone you were never meant to be. You would have had to compromise your growth. You would have had to silence parts of yourself. You would have had to adjust your direction just to maintain something that was never fully aligned. And that is not what your path was designed for. You were not meant to fit into spaces that required you to shrink. You were not meant to hold on to connections that limited your expansion. You were not meant to chase opportunities that could not sustain your purpose. And so, instead of allowing you to walk into those situations, you were redirected. Again. Consistently. Intentionally. And now, the truth stands in front of you. You were never being rejected. You were being protected. Every closed door was a shield. Every delay was a shield. Every person who left was a shield. Every moment that did not work out the way you expected was a shield. Placed between you and a version of your life that would have taken you further away from who you are meant to become. And once you truly understand that, something changes permanently. You stop questioning your past. You stop wondering what you did wrong. You stop carrying the weight of what if. Because you know now there is no version of your life where those things were supposed to stay. There is no alternate path where everything worked out the way you wanted that would have led you to where you are now. This path, the one you are on, is the result of every redirection working together. Every closed door aligning you. Every separation positioning you. Every delay preparing you. And that means something powerful. It means you have never been off track. Even when it felt like you were. Even when nothing made sense. Even when you questioned everything. You were still being guided. Still being protected. Still being moved into alignment with something greater than what you could see at the time. And now you are no longer looking at rejection as something that happened to you. You are seeing it as something that worked for you, something that stood in your defense, something that preserved your path, something that carried you forward when you could not see where you were going. And this is where your peace settles in, because you are no longer resisting what happened. You are understanding it. You are no longer holding on to what left. You are recognizing why it had to. You are no longer questioning your value. You are standing in it. And from this place everything changes, because now you move differently. You trust differently. You see differently. You no longer fear rejection, because you understand its role. You understand that if something is removed from your life, it is not a loss. It is protection in motion. And that truth, it frees you. It frees you from overthinking. It frees you from self-doubt. It frees you from trying to force things that are not aligned. Because you know now what is meant for you will remain, and what is not will be removed. Not to harm you, but to protect you. And that is the final revelation. Rejection was never your defeat. It was your shield. It was your covering. It was your divine protection guiding you every step of the way. And now you walk forward with it knowing, not with fear, not with doubt, but with certainty. Because everything that did not work out made way for everything that will. Type "I am protected" and aligned in the comments if you receive this message. Blessing code 1313 is now activated over your life. As this revelation settles into your spirit, understand this sacred truth: every seed you release becomes a shield of light in someone else's darkness, just as rejection became your shield in your own journey. When you give through Super Thanks with the PayPal link in the description, you are not supporting a message. You are opening a river that carries healing, clarity, and truth into lives that are still struggling to understand their pain. The word declares, "Those who sow in tears shall reap in joy," and this is not a distant promise. It is a living exchange happening through your obedience right now. I declare this with you. When I give, I step into divine alignment, and what I release multiplies into breakthroughs I may never see, but heaven will always honor. This moment is not ordinary. It is prophetic, and your response carries eternal weight. Do not delay this act of faith, because hesitation can cause you to miss the very window heaven has opened for you to participate in this mission. Go now. Move with purpose. Give through the PayPal link or the QR code, and become a vessel through which God continues to reach the hearts that are still searching for this truth.